Welcome to Deprogramming with your host, Terry Lynn, the show that explores mind control tactics used for millennia to shape our thoughts and beliefs. We dive deep with experts to understand the harsh reality of what is really going on and how to unwind the damage. Here's your host, Terry Lynn.
Together, because you're there to make someone else look good and you get really comfortable in that role. But then when I ended up being abused and then I was abused again, and once you're abused, it's almost like you have a bumper sticker that says, please rate me. Like you don't have the value, you don't have the voice. And when I started in this a decade ago, the average age that a little girl would post a naked selfie on social media was 12 years old. Now, a decade later, the average age a little girl will now post a naked selfie a decade later is 7 or 8 years old.
Welcome to Deprogramming. This is Terry Lynn, and in this episode, we are focusing on grooming. Specifically, grooming as a pervasive tactic to mind control. The word grooming is very well known at this point. It's a hot topic, and it has taken on a very negative connotation. It used to be very acceptable for parents to groom their children. They would groom them in their traditions, perhaps their culture, their specific way of life in that particular family unit, their means of commerce, making money. Maybe they had a farm, maybe they were carpenters. It was necessary to train up the children in the way of the family. When the world started getting smaller and communication was much easier around the world, what we had is more influence on the family unit. And of course, over the course of time, we've had a breakdown of the family unit. Most times, parents not even living in the same household, and the opportunity for outsiders to come into that family unit, whether it be directly or indirectly, and start influencing, especially the vulnerable, the children. So the children now became very vulnerable to those outside influences, who became very good and skilled at their agenda. So in this episode, I wanted to focus on grooming. My guest wrote a book called Grooming, and she herself was groomed, and she lays out her life story of how she was sexually exploited at a young age, and how the grooming continued throughout her young adult life, and what if some of the aspects of that what were some of the reasons. And she's become kind of an expert on that subject. And I'll introduce her now. Her name is Elizabeth Melendez Fisher Good. She doesn't mind being called Elizabeth Good. And she is a pioneer in the anti-sex trafficking movement. She's helped thousands of survivors find freedom and a new life. She has expanded her work to help all break free from past trauma and self-defeating mindsets. Based upon her book, Groomed, and decades of experience in counseling, she launched an initiative which empowers churches and Christian organizations to break generational patterns and bulletproofs leaders and families. She is the founder and CEO of the Foundation United, which was created out of her passion to end sexual exploitation and protect children globally. The foundation collaboratively provides best practices and proven models to eradicate sexual abuse and exploitation domestically and internationally. Their initiatives create scalable, systemic change in education, law enforcement, healthcare, and the church. As a founder of Real Talk, as she'll talk about in our episode 2, she mentions that real briefly, she helps ministries address the root cause of demand and exploitation, from top leadership to kindergarten. Elizabeth holds a master's degree in psychology and is a recipient of the prestigious New York City Global Business Leader Award, SRQ Women of Influence Award, Tampa Bay Business Women of the Year Award, Woman of the Year Award, that is, and honored as one of New York City's 21 leaders for the 21st century. She's delivered 2 TEDx talks and 1 LiftX talk to 18,000 military leaders. She's a featured speaker at the 2022 Shared Hope International Conference and the Global Strategic Forum in Austria. She has a very rich background, as you can see, and I didn't even say all of it. Her especially personal experiences growing up and how she's gotten to the place that she has is astounding. What she has done with her life course, her path, and how she has dedicated so much of her time and resources to helping trafficked women, building what I might call safe houses, she might not call it that, and just support systems, high-level support systems, is incredible. And I have so much respect for her. We're going to talk more about her foundation and what she's created and some of the more practical ways that she has helped women that have been trafficked, and all of the tentacles that she has out in the school systems and law enforcement. And we're going to hear all about all of that in the next episode, not this one. We had a limited time with Elizabeth today, and this also gave us an opportunity to just focus on the aspect of grooming, define that, as well as a normal aspect of raising families, raising children, and how that is integral to a healthy society as well. In this episode, we focused also on the 5 most pervasive common traits of grooming. What would you expect in a family unit to occur if grooming was present? And I almost guarantee every family has one aspect, at least, of these grooming tactics in the forefront. It doesn't mean that parents are aware of this. It doesn't mean that they have ill intentions. It's just that we as a society would do well to look at the aspects of this lack of individuality that we raise our children with in general, lack of sovereignty that we raise our children with in general, and also understand, and her book really helps the reader to appreciate this, understand what the consequences of some of these traits of grooming are within families. We mean well as parents for the most part, but we need to upgrade our parenting as society in general. And we can see the consequences of that. I'm not blaming parents right now. I'm not blaming parents. So hear me out on this. But we see the consequences of the sex trafficking, the runaway girls. Why do they run away? Why are they in the state that they are? And boys. And we talk about girls, and we say girls most of the time, but she will tell you in her book that there's obviously boys involved with this too. We know that. It's bigger than we can imagine. So these children, let's say, are in such a vulnerable position. And we as parents are the frontline defenders for our children. Not that we are to blame, but we do have to understand where our responsibility falls in that as a collective. And what we can do as a collective at this point to protect the vulnerable, the children. So without further ado, we will have a chat with Elizabeth Good. Thank you so much for joining me today, Elizabeth, on Deprogramming the series. I really appreciate your presence today, and you have so much to offer. Today, what I wanted to focus on, you have a book, and I don't remember reading when you wrote that book, but I did finish it, and it was absolutely incredible. It's called Groomed. And I wanted to focus on this aspect of your work, and you're very multifaceted. You're a very busy woman. Because this series of deprogramming, we are focusing on the programs that are all being run on all of us, really, and especially the ones that are most harmful. And your background and what you've chosen to highlight in your life's work, really, I see, is so pervasive. The issues are so pervasive today that I wanted to have you on as an expert in this area of grooming, because what you bring to the table with that is, I think, what people need to understand and hear. And what I read in your book, which was very interesting, and it made me really think, was that the meaning today that we hear the word grooming, and it's automatically taken a negative connotation. And it's just a word, of course. No, there's some negative and positive outcomes to that.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Absolutely.
I think that, back in the day, it used to be, I was grooming my son for Harvard, or grooming him to take over the family business, or grooming. Grooming was like you were preparing the next generation. And then I think we've entered this dark time of speaking to what's really happening. And the grooming has come up now, all tied to, I think, deviance and sexual. And, it's sort of just flip. People don't even think about it. I had somebody give me feedback and something like, grooming's not positive. It's never positive. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
In today's context, because everyone's using the word, like, when I started in this a decade ago, the average age that a little girl would post a naked selfie on social media was 12 years old. Now, a decade later, because of the negative grooming, the sexualization, the grooming through sexualization, over sexualization before a child's even biologically ready, the average age a little girl will now post a naked selfie a decade later is 7 or 8 years old. They're not even chemically able to understand what they're doing, but we're learning neural pathways have been rewired. There's been a whole process, of deconstruction, like changing everything. You talk about programming, like our children are being wired, I'm saying, like, systematically to no longer be capable of intimacy, systematically programmed to no longer be prepared or able to have marriage or relationship because of the grooming. So it's taken a dramatic turn, and the term attached to all the negative is grooming. So I think it wins in a negative sense today, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And like anything else that is good or neutral, even hijacking to be something now bad, something they're using, they being whoever the predator happens to be, to their own ends. So it has really gone from an acceptable or positive connotation to an unacceptable negative one. Like a farmer has a to plot of land, and he has some sons, and he's going to groom them to be farmers. A wealthy man might groom his children to take over the business, go to college, to get the skill sets. That's grooming too. Well,
I think grooming is intentionality. And I think what's happened is we have gotten very unintentional. We've gotten very watered down. We've gotten very benign in our parenting, benign in our covering of children. We've allowed the children to take the front seat. And so I think the truly intentional is really coming from the negative side. We've been like, we're just too politically correct to say anything. We don't want to say anything to upset anything. So we're saying nothing. Right. The church, parents, a whole gambit is shifted. But we always say organized crime is killing it because they're organized. Like the darkness is organized. They're coming at it systemically, and they have been very intentional in the programming and the desensitization of our children. And that is who is winning in the programming area today.
That is who is winning. And it's gone from also families, as you mentioned, you alluded to just now, having the central focus on their children and their family and raising them. And now we have such a, quote, small world because we have so many more influences on us because of the communication aspects, the media. That wasn't the case a couple generations ago.
The world has gotten very small. Social media has changed everything. The greatest influence, like an FBI was at a speaking engagement, and the FBI agent that was there said the most dangerous place for your child to be today is in their bedroom alone with their smart device.
Yes,
it's a whole different game. It's no longer stranger danger, and don't walk up to that car and don't tell someone how to, don't give someone directions. It's who you have no clue who they are, but they are right in your child's bedroom, and they are skilled, and they will spend years grooming your child.
And it's happening so fast that I know that parents don't understand, that they don't understand the effects of that. They don't understand the dangers of that, even though on some level, of course, they do. but you're right, they're very skilled. So if you don't groom your child or indoctrinate them in the ways that you want them to be, then somebody's going to. If you don't, somebody's
it's not
going
going to happen through osmosis. And by not saying anything, I think a lot of parents are like, well, we're just too uncomfortable. We don't want to talk about that. Like, we can't talk about, like, guess what? Someone else is leading the narrative and leading your child. We've got to take the narrative back. We have to.
Yes, totally agree. And it's not just children, right? Like adults could be groomed too, or all indoctrinated into certain programs. But of course, the children are the most vulnerable. And so those are that's the next generation. So we want to protect them. So your background is especially, I wouldn't say your background, but your background supports your journey right now in highlighting sexual exploitation of children. And I'm not going to get this right, but because I didn't write it down, but from your book, correct me when I don't say this right, but the root cause of sexual exploitation is child sex abuse. Is that correct? Did I say that right? Okay.
When I moved from Chicago to Florida with the goal of doing nothing, that was sort of, I'm overworked, man. I got to bow out of this big city and come to Chicago. No. God had other plans. But I remember I was just trying to do an event we had a bunch of my girlfriends from Chicago wanted to come down here and do a women's event. Women need to slow down. We need to take care of ourselves. But they're like, you need a philanthropy committee and you need this, you need that. And they said, go out, you're new, ask what's happening. This was in 2010. So this was 12 years ago, 13 years ago. Ask what's happening that we could bring to the light, like what is hidden, what's underfunded, what's like an underdog issue. And so in 2010, when I moved to Sarasota, Florida, which is Siesta Key, Longboat Key, major wealth, it's beautiful here, to be told, well, how about the fact that our local children are being sold for sex? And I'm like, what? I come from Chicago. We know our crime. We're mafia city. We're shooting capital. Like we know our crime. I'm like, what do you mean your local children are being sold for sex? What are you talking about? And when they said, that is the definition of human trafficking in America, like everyone wants to believe it's just Cambodia. It's just the movie Taken. It's a big white van somewhere else. But every zip code in America, I was educated moving to Sarasota to do nothing, that the root of childhood sexual abuse in America or child sex trafficking in America is sexual abuse, that 92% of victims of sex trafficking were abused as children. And the stats tell us 1 out of 3 little girls and 1 out of 5 little boys. So that's a lot, right? You look, it's not you, it's the person to your right, it's the person to your left, right? Carry a secret of childhood sexual abuse. And those that carry it, and it doesn't matter if it's like every day or if it was just from a horrific person one time, it's like a lightning bolt. You know how trauma hits a person. And so when a child keeps a secret, everything begins with a secret. And over years, that shades of gray and that shame, they typically say that statistically by 12 to 14, a child that's really distraught from the abuse runs away. And within 48 hours, what they told me in Florida when I got here, within 48 hours, 80% of these little runaways, does not matter what zip code, they're approached by a predator who presents like a couple at a bus stop because the women will help the men because they were raised as abusers and now they're recruiters, or a boyfriend, they call him a Romeo pimp. And the girls are like, finally, someone loves me. They literally just have to say to them, are you hungry? I bet your parents didn't know how to love you. I'll love you. And a kid's like, oh, thank God. Their 11-year-old brain, 12-year-old brain that has been used for sex their entire life by someone that shouldn't have, thinks it's a way out. And they literally just get them a little bit on a drug and then they sell them for sex statistically 15 to 40 times a day for 7 years. So a child that thought they were running away from the worst thing in their bedroom now finds themselves trapped into this lifestyle. And then they stop believing they're worth more. So I think it's the most horrific epidemic we have going in America. And no one's really excited to talk about it.
Yes. And we're going to get into so much more about what you're doing in our next episode that we will meet again, and I'm told about a month. So we're going to be talking about your foundation and more intricate details on all of the programs that you've really helped to set up, or even single-handedly maybe have done that. And so now that we have defined kind of grooming and show that word has had a negative connotation, but the reasons behind how you're going to raise a child in the way that your family is, your belief system, your values, that's not bad. That's not a bad thing. We want our children to be healthy. We want our children to have our traditions, our culture, whatever we value. But we're going to be talking about the more negative aspects of indoctrination. So that's what we're really focusing on. And in your book, you said the personality traits that we were born with define how we respond to grooming. And I totally agree, because I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand, actually, in my own family. And you talk about 5 personality traits that are not all of the personality traits, but they're 5 most pervasive common traits of grooming. And I'm just going to list them real quickly, and I'm going to let you talk about maybe each one or however you'd like to tackle that. The first one is being groomed for appearances. And the message is, groomed for appearances rather than authenticity. I wanted to make sure I added that. And the message is, you only exist to make me look good. You don't matter as much as me. The second one is groomed to be invisible. And the message is, your existence doesn't matter to me. The third one is groomed to endure. And the message you hear is, you're stronger than everyone else. You can handle it all. Number 4 is groomed for judgment. And the message you hear is, you are unforgivable. And the 5th one is, you are groomed for financial fear. The message is, there's not enough for you. So those are the 5 most pervasive common traits of grooming. And I would guess that a lot of the girls that you, all of the girls that you have come in contact with and helped, you can pretty much quickly identify which of these grooming traits that they come to the table with most. And I guess maybe I could identify most of those in me to some degree. It was actually hard for me to identify one that was real strong, but I definitely was groomed. But yeah, so tell me a little bit about those traits and your experience in seeing them in the girls that are trafficked.
Well, I do think that, they're also common that maybe all of us in different times of our life might have walked in them. When I was little and I was raised in a lot of trauma, I had a sister that was tragically killed. I was sexually abused. No one ever processed anything with me. So my belief, what was groomed into me, I don't think my parents to this day, who are 87 and 84, would say, we didn't care, we groomed you not to matter. But right. The messaging that you come into agreement with, it's what we come into agreement with, was that I don't matter and that I'm invisible. Like nobody saw me. My grief didn't matter. I remember how you feel is how you project. I even remember being in elementary school and teachers saying, I just can't remember your name. Oh, were you in the class? No, I was invisible. People talk about how you manifest how people see you, but I do think our thoughts and our beliefs, they frame our existence. And as a child, I felt very invisible. And then, I transitioned, and my dad was, my parents came from not a lot of anything. My dad came over from Puerto Rico, and as a teenager, when he was 15, he had 3 younger sisters, and his parents didn't learn English, and he was the one that had to go into the schools, register him and his sisters. His whole goal was to acclimate. I want to belong. I want to look like I belong here. He married my mom, who's O'Brien. So I had Melendez and O'Brien. I want someone that looks American. I want to look, and my family needs to look the part. He would hide that our last name was Melendez. So there was a lot of grooming for appearances, whereas a lot of people come from other countries, so it's all about your own family. A lot of people come from other countries and they're proud of their culture. We weren't taught Spanish, my grandparents didn't even speak English, and none of us were taught Spanish. We were to look American. My mom had to dye her hair blonde. Everything was an appearance of not looking Spanish. And so I really knew what my dad's idea of good looking was, and we worked hard to match that. When I talk about different personalities, when I was younger, I wanted that. I wanted to please him. And then some children are born where they're like, screw you, I'm never going to please you. I'm going to gain a ton of weight, and I'm going to look really bad, and I'm going to walk in the room and make you embarrassed because I'm not playing that role. But some of us, are very comfortable playing the role. We don't even realize we're playing it. And I think that's what's interesting about all of these. I don't think we're intentionally knowing that we've come into agreement with them. It's just the normal we know, right?
It's the normal we know. Yeah, it's even as an adult, it's sometimes hard to look back and figure all that out of how we were indoctrinated, because it's still the only lens that we have unless we are deprogrammed from that. I like to say, unless we are just so self-aware and we just keep doing the work. Some of these aspects, I mean, we can see all of these in maybe somebody else, and maybe some in ourselves as well. But
yeah,
the girl that has been groomed to be invisible, her existence doesn't matter to parents. That girl is going to look for, in turn, going to look for value outside of herself. Is going to look for acknowledgement outside of herself.
The appearance and the invisible go well together because you're there to make someone else look good and you get really comfortable in that role. But then when I ended up being abused and then I was abused again, and once you're abused, it's almost like you have a bumper sticker that says, please rate me. Like you just, you don't have the value. You don't have the voice. You believed you didn't matter. I quickly grew into the groom to endure. I would say the one that I think wreaked the most havoc on my life was groom to endure, because I thought I had pivoted and I'd overcome and I'm not invisible. I sort of went from like the good girl to the bad girl. And I took on a role that, well, I don't care. It doesn't bother me. And if you need me to be sexy, I'll be sexy. And if you want me to be this, I'll be that. Like I deadened who I really was, because I am a very sensitive spirit, a super sensitive soul. And I took on the role of, I'm just so tough. And I think a lot of women, I've worked with, I was in ministry in Chicago as an area pastor at a mega church in a super affluent area of Chicago. And a lot of the women that are married to high powered husbands are groomed to endure.
Yeah, I bet.
You confuse even abuse with strength. And it's a very fine line in shades of gray. And, I'll never forget when I got divorced from my husband that I full boat ran into, because I was perfectly groomed for him. We were perfectly groomed for each other. When I ended up getting healthy, if we would have matched and gone that way, it would have been fantastic, But when it ended, the amount of people that said, we're so glad that's over. We don't know how you endured that. Like the embarrassment, because, when you are groomed to endure, you're just, you think you got it all covered. You think you're looking good. You think you've made everything look good. The fact that other people could see through it, I think is a little shattering and a little devastating. And this book, I wrote that book. You asked when I wrote it in 2020. I wrote it way before 2020. It came out in 2020. I wrote it as I was going through my first divorce. It started back in 2016. Okay. I remember saying, my brain is in so much trauma. My agent's like, I think your trauma is going to help write some really good stuff. So women, I lead a group through this. It's called Real Talk for Women. And I could share more about that. I'll be posting it for people. And it's a coaching experience through it that help light bulbs go off. Because I think that the great surprise is, once people start realizing and hearing other people say it, it unlocks like, oh my gosh, me too. And oh my gosh, I understand. Like, I think we are so quick to be okay with the role we play, and we rarely challenge it and call ourselves higher. So it's really fun to take the pause and to see what we want to keep. And if it's time for a pivot, and that's really what the book does. It walks you through a lot of this grooming in a lot of different ways, and then asks, what do you want to be done with? What's no longer okay for you? And it's been so fun to see women all the way up to their 80s just like realize, I can't believe I've settled for this for so long. And it's not about throw the husband out, get a divorce, but it's about take back. I'm done playing a supporting role in my own life. I want to be the actress. I want to be the star. It could be a co-star. It doesn't have to be a supporting actress role.
Do you have the book right there that you can show the... Okay, perfect. Thank you. Because I don't have the physical copy. Yeah, that's perfect. I'm glad. I'm going to put some links down below because we have so much more to share from you and your resources, but where people can buy that book. And I'm glad you mentioned a little bit at the end about that particular aspect of it, because it is a self-reflective tool that you can go through. There's certain chapters that ask you to reflect on this and this question and write things down. And by the way, Kathy O'Brien, who I interviewed, and it's an acquaintance of mine, she agrees with everything that you said on journaling and writing and how important that is, and writing with your handwriting. She has a whole system set up too. So that book is excellent for anyone who feels that they fall into that category of perhaps sexual exploitation in their past, or being groomed in certain ways that you find are hard to move forward from. So we'll put the links there, and any other links that we can find for you until next time, because I know the audience is going to be wanting more, and so we're gonna post that below. So we'll get into so much more with you about what you're doing with your foundation, the resources that you provide, and how people can support your foundation, and also how we know, this is a main question too, we're going to talk about next time, how we know which organizations are legitimate or not. I from what I've seen on your website, that's one of the most legitimate, far-reaching organizations I've ever seen, and we've seen a few of them. So we're going to go into that a lot more next time. I know you have to run now.
Yeah, no, I'm passionate about helping each person like unlock their total potential, because you know what, especially as women, it's not a competition. And the people that are, you know, that's why some organizations struggle, because the identity of the leaders, it's about knowing like there's nothing you could do to take away from me. You and I together are only going to make each other look better. And if you put together your best with someone else's best, and that's what this helps to do too through the book, is like, who are you? I think we are really like starving to get real.
So is that your next book? That's the name of it?
Speak the Unspeakable.
Okay, that's the next one. Okay.
It sort of continues the conversation, because it's time that we do get real. Like, we can't just talk about it. We have to start changing everything.
Yep. Talk is cheap. We got to get going. Yep. Do some good work, right? We're going to try to raise awareness here, and that's what we're trying to do. And so we'll offer some resources through whatever we can glean from your organization. So I really appreciate your time today.
I'm so grateful, and I look forward to being with you again.
Okay. You've been listening to Deprogramming with host Terry Lynn. To connect to Terry or to check out our other shows, head to lifesource.global. And don't forget, hit the like, subscribe and share buttons. This show has been brought to you by Source Light Productions.